Hello, so it's Michael here, and I am back to do another tutorial for you guys. So the tutorial this time is going to be for how to set up a double door within Unreal Engine 5. So it does build upon the previous tutorials I've done already. So if you've not already checked out the interaction system or the simple doors, do go ahead and check those out first. So here it is, a double door. So this is all a single actor. It's all based on the individual components within that actor that you're looking at. So there are a few changes that we need to make to the interaction system to help facilitate this, but some of the features that it has is it can distinguish between the individual components and show different messages, as well as the highlights that you get there being different. So yeah, so let's get into it. We're back again in the tutorial project that I've got open, and in terms of setting up a double door, there is a few things that we do need to do, particularly with the interaction system, to help facilitate some of the things that we would want to be able to do. So at the moment, the way the interaction system works is it essentially sends a sort of message to interact to the actor as a whole, and it doesn't currently distinguish between any of the individual components within the actor. Now with something like a double door, you could quite easily just use the single door, change the frame a little bit so it's only half, or sort of remove one of the sides and then kind of like flip it. That would work, and you'd essentially have then two separate actors. That, however, isn't always the most convenient way to do it, especially if you've got quite a few different places you'd like to put a double door. It can start to get a bit tedious if you've always got to place two halves. But yet again, it's generally a lot better to make sure that you're keeping all the sort of logic all in one place. So ideally, if we're making a double door, it makes sense that everything, regardless of the double door, is within the single actor itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open up the content browser, and I'm going to navigate to the interaction system. So the first thing we want to do is actually open up the base, because what we need to do is add a few things in here so we're able to get some of the additional information we need to be able to interact on a per component level within an actor. So the first thing I'm going to do inside the interaction base, we're going to add two new variables. And I'm going to call this one raw current hit data, and that just needs to be of type hit. That just needs to be type of hit result, like so. And then we can add another one, and this is going to be the raw previous hit data. So these themselves, so if I was to get one out and then just expand it, you can see all the data that is stored within there. And this is what gets generated when we do the line trace from the interaction system to determine what we've hit. Usually we tend to just use the hit actor, which for most cases is all we need. But as I mentioned, if we wanted to start dealing with interactions on a per component basis, we kind of need to know what the actual hit component is that we've hit, so then we can tell the actor what it needs to do based on what it's hit. So with that done, we then just need to create two new functions in here. Actually, we'll just move those up to the hit category. Yeah. With that done, if we want to go ahead and add a new function, and this one's going to be called get current hit component. And for this one, we'll just want to drag in the raw current hit data. And if we use the break hit results, this allows us to get some of the data out of here. I'll just connect a return node. And then what we want to do is check if it's a blocking hit. So that's kind of as it hits something. And then we want to connect the hit component as well. Now the reason why we use the blocking hit is because if the line trace hasn't actually hit anything, this particular data may still be populated. So we need to know if that's true or false. Okay, so that's that done. And then the last thing we need to do for this particular function is just select the first node there, the main input, and we want to just check that it's a pure node. So just put a little tick there. The next one I want to do is essentially the same thing, but for the previous data. So I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate this particular function, and I'm going to call this one get previous hit component. So, and then it's just a case of updating the variable it uses to the previous hit data. And again, just want to double check to make sure that's a pure node. Okay, so in terms of the interaction base, that's all we need to do with that. Just move those up to the trace as well, just to make sure it's tidy. Yeah, so that's the base done. So now we can move to the interaction core. So if you remember, this is where all the main interaction stuff happens, in terms of checking what we can and can't interact with. So there's a few things I want to do first, and that's just to help tidy this particular section up. Might not look like it needs tidying up, but obviously there will be some additional things we need to add. So we're just going to put a few things into some functions just to help keep that tidy. So the first thing I'm going to do is off the main branch where we check if the current hit actor is the same as the actor we've currently hit, or say not equal. You've got these two nodes here where we set the previous hit actor and the current hit actor. Well, what I'm going to do is just collapse that to a function. And I'm going to go ahead and call that one update hit actor. Like so. If you double click in it, you'll be able to see the nodes, and they should be exactly the same as what was on the outside. So I'm just going to rename the input pin that it created. I'm just going to call that one new hit actor, just to make it a little bit easier to understand what's happening. So again, this will function the same way. So the current hit actor, that gets set into the previous hit actor, and then the current hit actor gets updated to whatever the new input is. So if this was unticked like that, then it would just set it to to null, essentially. So it would just sort of empty the reference, which is perfectly fine. So that's that done. The next thing I want to do as well is actually create a new function that'll actually be similar to the update hit actor, but it's actually going to be for that raw hit data that we added to the base. So create a new function. I'm going to call this one update hit data, and we do need an input on that. I'm going to call this one new raw hit data, and again for the type it needs to be the hit result, like so. And then what we can do is we need to set the raw previous hit data. And then the node we need to connect to this one is the the raw current hit data. So we can just get that as well. And just remember these variables are within that particular base class that this is a child of. Once we've done that, we can then set the current raw hit data. And this is going to be very similar to the update hit actor, so it's just going to connect over to here. Just like so. Okay, so now if we go back to the trace for interact function, what we're going to end up doing is actually getting a few more things off of here. So as you can imagine, that's probably going to start to look quite untidy. So what I'm actually going to do is create a macro that kind of handles that particular data. So if we're going to a new macro, and I'm going to call this one get relevant hit data. And then we want an input on there. That's just going to be called hit. So what we can actually do is we can drag straight from that hit sort of input straight to the output there, and we'll just call that output new hit. So for this particular macro, there are a few more outputs we do need, so I'm just going to get those added now. So the first one, the next one, I'm going to call this one actor not equal, and that needs to be a type bool. The next one we want is going to be of type actor, You just want to make sure that's the object reference, and that can be called hit actor. And then the next one we want to do, it's going to be another bool, and that's going to be called component not equal. So the top sort of three really, they're kind of similar to what we've already got in there already, or certainly will be. Just here where we're sort of checking that information. But as I've mentioned, there's going to be scenarios where, say you're looking at an actor, but then you look at a different component. So the actor is the same. So with this current system, nothing would actually happen. So we also then need to start checking the component if the component is different as well. So going back to sort of the double doors example that we're obviously making this particular tutorial, if you're looking at the left side of the door and then move to look at the right side of the door, we need to know that that's happened. And just comparing the actor isn't going to give us the results that we need. So if we go back to the get relevant hit data macro again, we can start sort of setting some of these things up. So if we pull from the hit result and we just break that hit result, like so, and then we can get the current hit as well. So the get current hit actor. And the first thing we can do is pull from the hit actor on the break hit result, and we can check if it is not equal. And we just connect the current hit actor there. Like so. This one can then just connect straight to the actor not equal. Like so. The next thing we need to do is just plug the reference to the hit actor into the hit actor there, just so we know what we've gotten. Just going to tidy this up a little bit. The next thing we need to do is regards to this hit component here. So what we want to do this time is get the raw current hit data, and we want to do another break hit result. So in regards to this additional data, we could store all these values separately, kind of like what we did with the hit actor. But in the long term, particularly if you start to deal with some other things, it can be useful to have the actual raw hit data itself, which is why we've gone down that particular route. But what we're going to do is take the hit actor from the current hit and check if it's not equal to the hit component, the hit component from top one, and compare it with the hit components on the one underneath. So that's the raw one, and then we can plug that one straight into there. Right, so I'm just going to collapse these back down, hide on the unused nodes. Okay. Right then, so that should be that. So that's that particular macro where it's set up there. So that's going to look a little bit tidier when we pop this into here. So what we can start doing is, in a second, is actually start connecting some of these things up. So this entire section here, we can just go ahead and remove. And we'll just, from the line trace by channel, we connect that up to the hit on that particular macro. And then we want the actor not equal, and we'll connect that back up to this first branch here. Like so. And then what I'm going to do is just move some of this stuff out of the way, just to give ourselves a little bit more room. What we now need to do is start to use some more of the that additional function we made, that update hit actor. And what we want to do is place that after the update hit actor. So we update the hit actor, and then we update the hit data. These both require an input, so we can go ahead and connect those up. So from the hit actor of that macro, we connect that to the new hit actor, and then the raw hit data, we can connect that up to the new hit there. Okay, so just going to do a little bit of tidying of these nodes. Okay. Another thing I'm going to do as well, just whilst we're tidying things up here, is the current hold duration. I'm actually going to go ahead and place inside the update interact state, because generally it tends to be something that happens needs to happen whenever we call that particular function. So I'm just going to plug that into there. So I have just disconnected this root here because I'm going to add a new one underneath, like so. Okay. So the next thing we need to do on this particular section is, so we've come in, the actor is the same, so it's not different. We do a quick recheck here on the hit. That's mainly in case the actor is different. But if that's false, it's at that particular point we want to check if the component we're looking at is the same component from the previous hit. So we can just use that component not equal, and then we can do something from that. And in this example, what we need to do is update the hit data. I'm just going to bring these over a little bit so we can connect from this particular section up here, like so. And then we'll need another update interact state there as well. Okay, so we'll look at a bit more tidying up stuff here. So another thing we do need to do, particularly on this branch here, where we essentially clear the current hit actor and move it into the previous. So that's when we're not looking at anything. We do then need to update the hit data as well. So we can just, from the current hit, where we set the previous hit actor, we can just then update the hit data as well. And we'll just connect that like so. So you can just plug that in. And then we can actually just remove that current hold duration as well, because that is now in the update interact state function instead. Okay, so we've nearly finished reworking this particular section here. So the last thing we do need to do is in regards to the update interact state. So generally that tends to be used for updating certain aspects, particularly the outlines of the things we're looking at. At the moment, the only thing that's on there is whether or not we've hit an actor, which we kind of need some additional information to pass through so we know whether or not there's been a component change as well. So if we go into the update interact state, and what we want to do is actually just add a new input to this particular function. And this is just going to be a component change, like so. And then if we go back to the trace for interact function, what we need to do is just tweak some of these inputs here. So if we come to the third sort of row, we want to tick the component change. So for these first two, that's just something in regards to the actor. And if it gets to this one, then it means there's been a change in the component itself. And the bottom one, there's kind of like nothing. The actor you've hit is different, so you're not looking at anything anymore. So that should help facilitate that. The next thing we need to do is in regards to the main sort of upper level. So that's the interaction itself, and that's where the update interact state is set up. So if you'll notice, we've got the update interact state here, and it's now got the new input on there. What we do, however, need to do, because in the parents of this particular function, we did add that current hold duration into this particular function, but in here it's not currently being called. So what we want to do is just add the parent function into there. So if you right click on the start the sort of first input node, there should be an option that says add call to parent function, and that should give you this orange sort of node. So whenever this is called, it kind of jumps back into the parent and then calls whatever this is. So the great thing about this particular node, you can stick it at the beginning or you can put it somewhere else and just kind of choose where that parent functionality gets called. In this particular example, I just need to connect it like that, just so it gets called at the beginning. And then I'm going to just replace this over here to the input over here, just so the line's not trailing. Okay, so As I mentioned previously, this particular function is kind of the main one we use for dealing with the outlines of stuff. So at the moment we've done all that work in the core that helps us know when we're looking at kind of like a different component and things like that. But at the moment we're not doing anything with that data. So what we can do, if we come to the beginning here, and we'll just add another branch into here. And for this, we want to do the component change. So if there hasn't been a component change, we just want it to do exactly what it was doing previously. So there's no sort of change there. So it sort of goes down that particular path. Having said that, obviously there might be a few additional things we need to add, but I'll check that shortly. However, if there is a component change, we need to do some stuff regarding the outlines. So we want to update the current hit actor for both those components. And that would be okay. And then we would then need to make sure that the interact option is there. Now, for some of you, you've probably noticed that this probably isn't actually going to do anything different. At the moment, we've taken the current actor, we're setting it to not show, and then we're taking the current hit actor and then setting it to show. So we're not actually doing anything with the components we've hit, and you are exactly right. So with this particular function, this is one of the blueprint interface functions. And at the moment, the only thing that's on there is show. So ideally what we need on here is we need to be able to pass some information to the component that we're looking at. So I've just double clicked on that to open it up, so it should be the BPI_interact. And if we select the outline state function, we just want to add a new input to that. And I'm going to call this hit component. And for the type, it needs to be of, I always get this mixed up, so primitive component, I think. Primitive component as an object reference. That's so. So when you come back to the AC interaction, you should see that particular input now visible on there. So any blueprint that does use that blueprint interface, we'll quickly open up a door just so you can see it. So we go to the door base. Now has that input on there. Now the great thing about this particular input is you don't have to use it. So if you're making a particular blueprint that doesn't need to be able to use different components, or like in terms of what you're looking at, you don't need to do anything with this. You can just leave it unconnected. And that particular input is there for if you need to use it, which for like a simple door, you don't really need to, which is great. But with a double door, we'll sort of get to that shortly. So going back to the main AC interaction again, we now need to populate this information. So the first thing we need to do, for the first one, we need to get the previous hit component. And the reason it's the previous hit component, it's because back into the core, during the trace for interact, before we call this particular function, we have already updated those details. So what we're currently looking at has been updated to the current, and the one we've looked at previously is now the previous. And then for the show outline one, where we want to actually show it to the next one, we need to get the current hit component. And just as a reminder, these two are the pure functions that we created in the base interaction. And then this particular line, we can just connect it to the true on there if there's been a component change. Like so. Now, in terms of these ones on the previous ones that we had set up, we do want to go ahead and just connect the inputs to these as well, just so it's there. It might be that there's a particular, when you look at a particular actor, you might only want it to ever show what you're looking at, like the actual component. It might not physically do anything, but it'll highlight what you're looking at in terms of the component. So we can just get the current hit component for this one. We can show, And then for that one, that's the previous. We'll get the previous hit actor on that one. Like so. And then for the last one, that's be the previous as well. Like so. Let's double check that's everything. Okay, so that looks okay to me. I think that's all set up. Now let's go ahead and just double check to make sure nothing's broken. Oh, that's not a good sign. Let me just restart. What was the reason? Exception violation. Yeah, we'll just send and restart. So back in a second. Okay, so I'm back. So yeah, sometimes the editor just likes to crash. So let's try that one again, shall we? Fingers crossed that it doesn't crash again. We'll see. There we go. Yeah, I'm not sure why that happened. But yeah, if the editor does crash, it doesn't always necessarily mean you've done anything wrong. It's kind of one of those things where just assume you've done everything right and then try again. If it does crash again, you might have done something wrong. But as you can see, it seems to be okay now. So yeah, so let's test to make sure everything still works the way it did previously. Yes, that's looking okay there. We'll check that one as well. Yeah, lovely. And that door still opens as well, and the door handle goes down. Great. So far, all those changes you've made has affected nothing. Lovely. However, it should have allowed us to have access to some additional information we'll be able to use to help set up the double doors. Now, the double doors themselves, they do have a little bit more to them, just because in essence you're doing handling two things.